everyone. We are Balint and David.
Hi.
Here is our book club presentation. The lecture is Introduction to Sociology. Our lecturer is Dr. Maria José del Pino Espejo. And the presenters are us, Balint Horváth, and me, David Cody.
And we are Erasmus students from Hungary.
So here you can see a picture of Charles Thornton Cooley, who will be our sociologist. He is an American sociologist. He was born in 1864 in August 17 in Michigan, and he died quite early at 1929 at the 7th May at age 65. He was born and died in Michigan too. He studied at the Michigan University and did his work. So our topic will be the theory of transportation. It's from 1893. We talked a lot with Balint, which will be our subject, or which is the best for us. And here is the final result. We will read a small part of the book. So, the location of towns and cities. The theory of urban location is an extremely complicated matter, and not wholly a matter of transportation nor of economic relations in early and wartime times. Military considerations are of great, if not paramount, importance in the original placing of cities. The first town in militant communities are forts, and their inhabitants find in them defense, a basis for hostile incursion, and a means of holding conquered territory. There have also been and still are cities that owe their importance to religious prestige. The supposed sacredness of particular place, political forces may also determine the matter. Modern instance in the fact already noted that in the western United States, in regions where there is almost no diversity of surface, inconsiderable town often grows up and the county seat simply because of the slight advantage due to the location there are of the cities, buildings and offices. Nor can it be denied that the site of cities is sometimes fixed by not better reason than the chance and possibly unwise selection of the first colonists. There are examples, of course, quite apart, the economic consideration that become predominant as society advances. Their mark work with or against the latter. In many cases, it would seem that the military requirements acts merely as modifying force. The position of a city is determined by economic causes within certain limits, wider or narrower, as the case may be, and within these limits the exact site is fixed by military capability. Aside from these causes, cities owe their origin entirely to economic forces. I have attempted to show that among these forces, transportation is the most important if we look at the question from the point of view of location. Two, it was not denied that the local facilities for production exercise an important and independent influence. Our next inquiry must be as to the manner in which transportation acts in determining the location of industrial centers. The following offered as the most general statement of the law. So the population and wealth tend to collect wherever there is a break in transportation. By a break is meant an interruption of the movement at least sufficient to cause the transfer of goods and their temporary storage. If there is physical interruption of the movement is all that takes place have what I may call a mechanical break. But if on the account of the close relation between transportation and exchange already pointed out, the physical interruption causes a change in the ownership of the transported goods, we have a commercial break. It will at once be obvious that a break of the first sort is of much less importance than one of the second. Even a mechanical break may, however, bring together many good reasons and necessitate considerable structures. There must be loading, unloading, and intermediate carriage of some sort. There must be buildings for storage, with persons to care for them and for the goods they contain. There must be also be some sort of provision for the instruments of transportation, ships, camels, railroad cars, or whatever they may be. During the process of loading and unloading, provision also for the persons that accompany them. Around this group of specialized labor and appliances there must, of course, collect a corresponding agricultural artisan and shopkeeping population of the sort characteristic of the time and the country in question. So the commercial break is almost always present at or near the physical interruption and greatly increases its importance. Where a break of this sort exists on an important line of transportation, tough it be in the midst of the desert. There must be a commercial city. The reason is not obscure. At the commercial break there are necessarily arise beside the machinery of transfer and storage already spoken of, the highly organized personnel and appliance of economic exchange. There must be a class of merchants and money changers who require buildings more or less elaborate for the carrying on of their business, and who stands to splendid style of living and draws together a relatively large and various subsidiary population. The nucleus, so the nucleus transform of a commercial city tends strongly tough to tendency may be countercated by adverse conditions to become the seat of manufacturer of political power and of the central institutions of all varieties of social organization. Even in the most primitive states, the commercial capital usually becomes the political capital and is commonly the seat of the chief temples and the culture of letters and art. The next question is, whence do breaks arise? If they have these important consequences, if social substance tends to leak out and fix itself wherever these interruptions occur, it is important to inquire into their causes. The most important of these causes are necessary physical interruptions, for example, the junction of land transportation with water transportation, of one kind of water transportation with another, or one of kind of land transportation with another. the location of the great number of commercial towns the world over and from the earliest times of the present days has been fixed at the point of juncture between land and water movements. It is hardly necessary to illustrate this statement in detail. The sheaf of seat of island towns is, or at any rate was before railroad came, in long navigable rivers at the point where these are the most easy accessible from the land. The point where the road and the river meet may be determined by the conformation of the land, especially if the surface is rugged or mountainous. We may then look for a town not far from the most commodious passes or at the confluence with the river of some small tributary whose valley makes a convenient roadway. Or the character of the river may decide the matter and the road may be drawn to a point suitable for a ford or a bridge. The names of innumerable towns ending in these syllables and their equivalents in other languages show how general has been the action of this cause. An artificial watercourse has the same effect as a river. Witness the rise of numerous towns upon the Erie Canal immediately after its completion. Russia points out the importance of isthmuses in this connection, that is of the narrowest point in the strip of land separating two seas, two important rivers, or a river and the sea. The two sides of isthmuses become, of course, points of transfer between land and water, and for this reason, according to the theory here maintained, are likely to be sites of cities. Upon the coast of a sea or of large lakes, the situation of a harbor, especially if harbors are few, is usually determining element in the matter and fixes the point of juncture between land and water movement. The physical necessity for a break is not confined to the point where the land and water buoyancy meet. It exists wherever the technical apparatus of vehicles and forces has to be changed. In water transportation, as it found at the point in the course of rivers where seagoing vessels must be exchanged for lighter and shallower craft. This seems to be the chief factor in determining the location of most commercial towns of the first class. They are situated upon estuaries of navigable rivers or upon the rivers themselves at a place not too far up to be accessible to large ships. The break is between two varieties of water transportation rather than between land and water. An exchange between boats built to slide over shallows and those built to cut the waves.
The fact that many great rivers have produced cities of this sort can escape no one, as the Nile, Alexandria and Cairo, the Euphrates, Babylon, the Elbe, Hamburg, the Weser, Bremen, the Thames, London, the Seine, Havre, the Rhone, Marseille, the Mississippi, New Orleans, the St. Lawrence, Quebec, the Hudson, New York, the Delaware, Philadelphia, and so on. Indeed, of cities famous for their commerce, those not situated on the estuary or lower course of a navigable river are comparatively few. Of course, the routes of land transportation are also drawn to these points, and it is quite possible that with the surprising development of railroads During recent years, the importance to a commercial city of having a navigable river to feed its trade is relatively diminishing. There is also a large class of towns whose situation is fixed by the meeting of two kinds of land transportation. Thus, in days, railways have much the same part in determining social development as formerly belonged to the rivers. In their original location, they are in great part influenced by the situation of existing cities. But once built, the railroad building precedents populations. The active towns are invariably placed on the line of the railway and the precise location. If the surface is at all irregular or mountainous, is likely to be fixed by the point of intersection with an important earth road. The point where the railroad crosses a navigable river is of course favorable as being a place where the exchange between land and water movement takes place. The interest of two railways has of itself no tendency to form a town, because there is no chance to the kind of transportation and no necessary to break. Before the appearance of railways, the formation of towns at the break between two kinds of land movement was not uncommon, tough, perhaps less conspicuous than now. Thus, the border of mountainous district, the line where the foothills lapse into the plain, is commonly the seat of the cities which are likely to be placed at the ends of the principal roads that traverse the mountains. The break here is between the vehicles and the seasons peculiarly situated to mountain transportation and those situated to the level and open country. Again, it would seem that in the East, particularly in former times when caravan transportation flourished, the border line between the former time the desert or arid plains and the fertile agricultural regions was often the site of cities. Some place not very far from this line must be the place where caravans are organized and merchandise collected and distributed. Thus, Professor Robertson Smith explains that the situation of Mecca as the place where the most important routes from the arid interior of the country came down through the mountains and meet the arable plain. Looking at this matter from a slightly different standpoint, it appears that the interruption is not necessarily due to a change in the natural features of the Earth's surface, but may be simply the change from the vehicles of a small and scattered movement to those of a large and unified movement. Breaks of this sort are exceedingly important in land transportation and exist wherever a number of small local movements come together and form by their junction a single large movement, or go to swell a large movement formed elsewhere. They correspond to the fact that the raw material of all commerce comes originally from the soil and must be collected at the central points by the vehicles and at the convenient seasons of local transportation. So also whether of a local produce is consumed by the scattered population must be distributed by similar means. This sort of movement naturally takes on a radial form, the small local movement drawing together to a common point and contributing to the larger movement that takes place between that point and the others at a distance. At the point of junction of the larger and better equipped and organized long-distance transportation with the crude vehicles of local conveyance, there is necessarily an interruption of the movement. If the conditions are in every respect uniform, considerations of convenience these place these points of collection and distribution at the center of the tributary plan. The location of many towns and cities seems to be fixed by this requirement alone. Leaving the study of purely physical conditions and taking with us our hypothesis that a break in a transportation is the indispensable condition to the formation of a commercial city, we see that the interruption may be due to political forces. The obstacles to trade arising out of the non-industrial organization of many societies, and particularly of international relations, often render it impracticable for the merchants to extend their operations far into other countries than their own. Trade is carried on through the medium of fairs, the marts, the staples, emporia, to which the merchants of both countries resort to exchange their wares. The national line, especially if it also divides different races, acts very much like the line between sea and land or other natural separations. Both the means of transportation and the ownership of goods must be changed, and we have the essential conditions of a commercial break. Among barbarous nations at all times, and among civilized nations in their early development, this is a cause of the first importance. At the present time its operation is not very obvious, partly because the practice of shipping goods to the interior under bond tends to prevent the action of existing restrictions from being localized at national boundaries. Before concluding this subject, it is worthwhile to emphasize the fact that, contrary to a somewhat general impression, the mere intersection of lines of transportation has no necessary tendency to cause the growth of a commercial city. What is required is a break transfer, storage, and the change of ownership, and if the break exists, no intersection is necessary. There are many points in this country where two railroads each doing an immense business interest without the slightest tendency to cause the growth of a city. Even if a large amount of freight and many passengers are interchanged, an insignificant junction and the restaurant are all that is necessary. In that case, we have a mechanical break of a very simple sort. More perfect arrangements for interchange of cars, for through billing and the like, tend constantly to make intersections as such of less importance. Indeed, we have here one reason for the continual aggrandizement of the large towns at the expense of the smaller, by the removal to them of the mechanism of transfer and commercial exchange. From one point of view, the number of breaks represents the expense of transportation, and the tendency to dispense with the smaller ones by means of interchange of vehicles, consolidation of lines, and so on, is a part of the progress of the division of labor. The question whether the result is not, for other reasons, undesirable hardly enters here. What has been offered regarding to the theory of urban location may be summed up as follows. Non-economic causes, as military and political, have a notable influence, especially in the earlier history of societies. Of economic causes of cities, the most general is pressure towards greater divisions of labor. The efficient use of natural forces is inseparable from the concentration of population and wealth. This cause acts independently of particular places and has of itself alone no action in fixing location. Two influences chiefly determine the location of cities: local facilities for production and local relations to transportation. The former of these acts mostly through the coarser and primary manufacturing industries. The final manufacturers seek the most convenient centers of distribution, that is, of transportation. Transportation itself, guided in its course chiefly by the physical diversity of the Earth's surface, is the main cause of the location of cities in an industrial society. The mode of its action is that population and wealth tend to collect a break in transportation. The reason being in the first place the necessity of the material and the symbolic machinery of transfer at breaks, and in the second tendency of the other economic activities to collect where that machinery exists.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. We are from Hungary. Bye bye.